The Varethi were already setting out the signing table. When I scratched the 43rd mark, I used the edge of my dog tag. The comm panel on the docking bay wall was brushed aluminum, and it held the score well. Shallow lines, clean, each one about the length of my thumbnail, 4 vertical, 1 diagonal, groups of 5. I'd started at the far left corner and worked inward. By the time Ambassador Cale Orvath's delegation arrived in their white travel robes, I was near the center of the panel, and the marks ran back behind me like a sentence that hadn't ended yet. The bay smelled of recycled oxygen and the sweet hydraulic tang of docking clamps. Through the viewports, the remains of the 7th Combined Fleet were visible against the dark. Hulls still venting trace atmosphere. Frigate with its whole port side blackened to the frame. They'd been there for 11 hours. Nobody had towed them yet. Too busy arranging flowers on the signing table. I scratched the 44th mark. Corman Dale Marsh, attached to the 19th Human Rapid Response, which was down to 31 personnel from 112. That was my unit. I hadn't started counting the other units yet. I was working in order, the 19th first, then I'd move to the Varethi auxiliary losses, then the border garrison, then the Harith civilian ships that had been caught in the second engagement. I had a long way to go. Behind me, the table was draped in the silver and gold cloth the Varethi use for binding ceremonies. Treaty document itself, 2 sheets of material I couldn't name, heavy as lead foil, sat in a case of transparent resin. It was very beautiful. Someone had spent real effort on it. The lead diplomat, Cale Orvath, was a tall figure, pale blue-skinned, with the elongated secondary fingers the Varethi use for their seal gestures. He moved quietly for a being that large. I didn't hear him approach until his shadow crossed the panel. "Courtsman," he said, in the translated voice that came through the emitter at his collar. "The ceremony begins in 14 minutes. "I know," I said. "I'll be there." He didn't leave. I felt him reading the marks. There were 44 of them by then, organized left to right in their groups of 5. These. I pressed the dog tag's edge into the aluminum for the 45th. "Names," I said. A pause. His emitter processed. "The marks represent individual names? 1 per mark. There are 45. 45 so far. I'm still on my unit." Another silence. When the Varethi go quiet, they go completely still. No fidgeting, no breath sounds you can hear, just an absence. Cale Orvath stood that way for a moment. "We have a full accounting in the treaty annex," he said finally. "Losses on both sides, by unit and classification. The document team was thorough. I'm sure they were. Combined losses fall within the modeled parameters for an engagement of this scale. The annex notes that the outcome was within acceptable parameters," I said. "Yes, I've read the annex." I scratched the 46th mark. Cale Orvath watched me do it. His secondary fingers moved once, a reflex maybe, the way a person shifts their weight when something makes them uneasy. "Courseman," he said. "The names are in the annex." "The names are in the annex," I agreed. But the annex doesn't know that Specialist Riva Cho had a sister on the Harith civilian convoy in the second engagement. The annex doesn't know she found out about the convoy 6 hours before the final push and went anyway. It doesn't know that. It has her name and her classification and her unit number, and that's not the same thing. He said nothing. I made the 47th mark. Tech Orvain. I'd known him for 3 years. He used to argue about card games. "The treaty is a good document," I said. "I've read the whole thing, not just the annex. The boundary agreements are clear. The mutual defense clauses are stronger than what we had before. The resource sharing protocols will actually help the border stations that have been understaffed for 2 years." Stepped back and looked at the marks. 47. Nearly a full panel width from the left edge. "It's a good document," I said again. "We should sign it." "Then I do not understand," Cale Orvath said. He was not being unkind. He was genuinely trying to process. "You don't have to understand it," I said. I turned to look at him. Up close, his eyes were a very pale amber, with a secondary inner lid that flickered slowly when he was uncertain. It was flickering now. "It's not for your benefit. It's for mine. I need to know how many before I put my name on something that says it's over." He looked at the marks. Back at me. The inner lid moved. "You intend to complete the count," he said. "After the ceremony, all of them. Varethi auxiliary losses too." I held his gaze. They were out there with us. Something shifted in his face then. I don't know the Varethi vocabulary of expression well enough to name it. It wasn't pity. It might have been the beginning of something more like understanding, but I'm not certain. His secondary fingers folded together in a gesture I'd seen before, in footage of Varethi memorials, the third of their 7 morning positions. He hadn't done it consciously, he did it the way you reach for something you don't know you're reaching for. He stood there looking at the marks for another moment. Then he said, "We should begin." I put the dog tag in my pocket, straightened my uniform. What was left of it, the 19th's patch, still on the left shoulder, scorched at the bottom corner. I walked with him to the table, and I stood where they positioned me, and when the treaty case was opened and the stylus extended, I signed. My signature sits second from the top on the human side. Below it came the 6 other surviving unit representatives, in order of seniority. Above it, the fleet commanders. Admiral Issa Durant, who'd lost 411 people on her flagship alone and had the eyes of someone who hadn't slept since the battle began. She signed without ceremony, handed back the stylus, and walked away from the table before the Varethi delegation had finished their own marks. I understand why. She had her own way of counting. The ceremony lasted 22 minutes. There were words spoken. I couldn't tell you what they were. I was already thinking about where I'd left off. 7. The 19th had 61 dead. I had 14 more marks to make before I moved to the next unit. After the 19th, it would be the 7th Perimeter, then the 3rd Combined, then the Varethi Auxiliary Battalions, then the civilian lists. When it was over, the Varethi delegation moved to the reception area. I walked back to the wall. I took out my dog tag. Kale Orvath was watching from the far side of the bay. I don't know how long he stood there. I didn't look up. I scratched the 48th mark, and the 49th, and kept going, group by group, effort right, the lines thin and clean in the brushed aluminum. That panel is still on that wall. The station is operational. It became a resupply hub under the new treaty protocols, well-staffed, busy. People walk past it every day. The Varethi maintenance crews leave it alone. I was told that Kale Orvath put a note in the station manifest when the first permanent crew took over. I never read the note. I don't need to. I know what the marks say.